Hey everyone, welcome back. So this video is going to be exploring the theme of fate in the play Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. A little bit of context: although it was a religious play set in a religious country, Italy, and with religious characters such as the friar, it did not mean people did not believe in fate and destiny. Many people in the audience would have believed in a predetermined fate and would therefore not find the idea as strange as modern audiences. So what is fate? Fate is the idea that events will happen outside the control of the people involved. In this case, Romeo, Juliet and their families. It is regarded as supernatural and unchangeable. In Greek mythology, there were 3 goddesses who presided over the birth and life of humans. Their entire existence was predetermined and could not be changed. So the idea of fate is from Greek mythology, which was still taught during the Elizabethan times. This video will look at the different times fate was mentioned and evidenced in the play, and how it drove the story onto the tragic conclusion it had. Was it inevitable? So the prologue. Before the play has even begun, the audience are made aware of the impending death of Romeo and Juliet. The prologue is the sonnet at the beginning of the play, in which everything that is going to happen in the rest of the play is introduced by a chorus. One of the more famous quotes is, "From forth the fatal loins of these 2 foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their lives." Fatal actually means deadly, so we know that someone is going to die, in this case the star-crossed lovers. And the phrase "take their lives" has a double meaning of suicide and birth. They're born from the 2 foes and they both take their lives at the end. The prologue also tells us that other people in the city will die and or be killed because of the feud. From ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. The use of the word civil in this case is civilians. So the citizens of the city of Verona will be dragged into the middle of the feud between the 2 families. The prologue is telling us that because of this feud, this ancient grudge, people will die. So the audience is already pre-prepared for deaths within the play, especially that of the 2 main characters. Repetitive references to death, graves and curses causes the audience to not be able to forget that Romeo and Juliet are doomed. These violent delights have violent ends. Despite the fact that they found each other and they do have a romance within the play, they will have a tragic ending, and the audience is never allowed to forget this because there are repeated references. Doomed love. So Shakespeare juxtaposes Tybalt's violent and menacing threats with Romeo and Juliet's first meeting. If you remember, Romeo sneaks into the Capulets' party, masquerade ball, and meets Juliet, as well as Tybalt seeing him from across the room. Tybalt in fact says, "To strike him dead I hold it not a sin, but is held back by his uncle Lord Capulet." It's another reminder that the feud will make their love impossible. At their very first meeting, Tybalt is already threatening Romeo's life and is threatening to kill him. Fate versus personal responsibility. Shakespeare explores the idea of who was to blame for what went wrong, and there are several different answers. So characters and circumstances can all be attributed to the end of the play, especially the tragic end. We'll be looking at how each character or circumstance could have contributed and looking at different perspectives. Friar Laurence. His ill-judged agreement to marry the teenagers in secret could have contributed a great deal to everything that's happened. Then his rather odd plan to simulate Juliet's death to avoid her committing sin by marrying a second man, when he could have just informed the families of the marriage. If he'd let the families know that Juliet and Romeo had already been married, even if they disagreed, then they would not have tried to force Juliet to marry Paris, and therefore they would not have needed to fake her death. Even if they could never be together, she would at least not have to be put into this terrible predicament. Although he thought that their marriage would change the family's rancor to pure love, it would not succeed if he kept it a secret. The plan failed because he didn't tell the families. The families could not reconcile because they didn't know of the marriage. So to that extent, Friar Laurence could have contributed to everything that happened. The nurse. She was the person who raised Juliet from a baby and has taught her everything that she knew. She aided and abetted the impetuous Juliet in getting involved with a family that hates hers, and then did not support her when she did not want to marry Paris. The nurse actively helped Juliet be courted by Romeo, sending messages and helping her meet with him. But then when her family demanded that she marry Paris, the nurse did not support Juliet and told her to just do as her parents said, even though she knew Juliet was already married. In fact, Juliet then does call the nurse a wicked fiend for this betrayal. Romeo. So he's reckless, impetuous, and more concerned about his supposed feelings than the reality of his actions. This could be attributed to his age or just his character, but that does not help the situation either. So if you marry in secret, no one will know or help you. He's in the same predicament and problem as Friar Laurence, because they did not tell anyone about the marriage. They could not be helped by any of their friends and families. He calls himself Fortune's fool, and by calling himself Fortune's fool implies he knows that whatever he does is doomed. So Fortune is again fate, the people who decide what is going to happen, and he is their fool. He kind of knows that his actions were not the smartest thing to do. Juliet. She was too in love to think straight and should have taken things far slower than she did. But again, remember, she was only 13, which is understandable. If she hadn't married in haste and hadn't listened to the friar's harebrained scheme of pretending to be dead, things may have been drastically different. If she'd been perhaps a little more mature and older, she may have been able to tell her parents about the marriage, and some of this could have been avoided. True love passion. That is what she believed, and that is what ultimately led to her tragic end. The feud, or the ancient grudge as it's called in the prologue. The feud itself means that everything that happens in Verona could potentially end in violence. It also will affect all the citizens of the city, as the two families are so prominent and connected. If you remember in Act 1, Scene 1, when the servants are fighting the other members of the Capulet family, people in the streets had to take up weapons in order to either join the families or defend themselves. So profaners of this neighbour staying still. The prince accuses them of killing their neighbours, as the feud is now out of hand. No one actually knows what the feud is about, how it began, or why it still continues. This is one of the reasons why the friar wanted Romeo and Juliet to marry, because he believed that their marriage could end this grudge that no one actually knew what it was about. Juliet's parents. Her parents contributed towards the decisions made by Juliet by not listening to what she wanted and what she felt. They dismissed her feelings because they saw her both as a child and as their property. Shows still some want of wit. When Juliet was upset, her mother showed no sympathy. So saying she has want of wit means that she does not have a lot of intellect. She's calling her stupid for not listening to what her Lady Capulet and Lord Capulet want for Juliet, which is for her to marry Paris. Fate. The idea that everything happening in the play is predestined adds a tragic twist to the story. No matter who you consider the architect of their demise, Romeo and Juliet were not going to have a happy ending. This was already predetermined and nobody could stop it. This theme is reinforced throughout the play and the audience is not allowed to forget this. So, was this video useful? Follow me on all my social medias and I'll keep you updated for any new videos. Share, like and subscribe. I would really appreciate that. And leave a comment if you have any questions. I'm always more than happy to answer questions to the best of my ability. Or if you just want to have a nice discussion or debate, I'm more than open to it. So, see you next time.